Yeah, I'm just starting to share my screen so that I hope that everyone can see it without problems. So yeah, thank you for joining us today for this workshop. It's really a pleasure for all of us to gather you today to get into the details together on educational planning and monitoring in cities, and based on the experience of your cities. So some of you may know me already. My name is Candy Lugas. I work at the International Institute for Educational Planning, and I am the coordinator of IIEP's research on cities and education 2030. And I am joined today by my colleagues, Chloe and Daniela, who will intervene later on during this workshop. So as you may know, IIEP is conducting research on cities and educational planning since a few years now. And together with UIL, we have run the survey to which your cities participated a year ago. We have conducted also qualitative research in 4 cities in France, and we are also currently extending this research to 5 cities in other regions of the world, including Medellin in Colombia, which is part of this cluster, also Manila in the Philippines, Dhaka and Khulna in Bangladesh, and Kigali, Rwanda, and we are working also with the University of Glasgow. So let me now launch this workshop with an introduction, a few words to explain you how we will proceed during this workshop. So briefly to explain the workshop objectives. Initially, we had planned a series of 3 workshops during several months, but then we realized that it may be also difficult for all of you who are very busy and with the sanitary situation to participate in all. So we decided to combine this discussion in one workshop covering 3 themes of analysis. And we really wanted with Alex to organize this workshop as part of the cluster activities to provide an opportunity to foster technical discussions among your cities on planning and monitoring their education strategies. Also to stimulate strategic and technical thinking among your cities on key dimensions of educational planning and management and monitoring and evaluation, and then to share experiences between cities, which is at the heart of this network of learning cities and of your cluster on this specific topic. So the workshop today is organized as follows. So after this introduction, we'll be discussing these 3 themes. So the first one on co-designing the education strategy at the city level. Then a discussion about educational planning and city integrated planning. So really very much in relation with intersectoral collaboration. And then the last theme of discussion will be in relation to monitoring and evaluation, evaluating the city's education strategy in the context of lifelong learning. So why these themes? Actually, because they really emerge from our research as really central themes in a number of cities. And actually, they constitute very key components of educational planning in cities. So it was important for us to discuss with you, to share some of our findings with the work with UIL and through the research, but also to learn from you on this topic. Each theme will be discussed as follows today. So firstly, IIEP will share with you the main findings of the research conducted in cities on the related theme. These are preliminary research findings based on the survey conducted with this cluster a year ago, but also on the qualitative research that we conducted in France. And of course, the research in Medellin and in the other cities that we will conduct soon will allow us deepening these findings, but also it will be the same for the discussions of the workshop will be also of great benefit for the research. And then the presentations will be followed by a presentation by a city on the topic. And I would like to seize this opportunity to deeply and warmly thank these 3 cities. So Huejotzingo in Mexico, Macao in Portugal, and Medellin in Colombia. for sharing the experience of their cities today and for making an in-depth presentation on these topics. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your presentations. And then after these presentations by CTE, we'll have a short icebreaker activity in relation to the theme. It's the first time that we at IIEP were handling that, my colleagues and I. So we're happy to do that. And at the same time, we're a bit testing. And then we'll have a guided discussion together. Okay, so you see here the overall format of the workshop, and you see that there is an after the workshop. Indeed, you have received a few months ago an invitation by Alex to connect you to a platform, to a Google Classroom, through which we can share experiences on cities, educational planning, and we can exchange. So we really encourage you to participate in this platform, to share your questions, your comments, the experience of your cities and the themes that we'll be discussing today. And also, I find it as a great opportunity for all of us to keep a regular discussion, a regular connection, and in a quite very practical way. So we'll use also the platform for follow-up activities to the workshop, but we'll provide you with more details on this after the workshop. So let me start now with the first theme of the workshop, namely the co-design of a city's education strategy. So it's good to define firstly what we mean by co-design. So I have put here a definition that I found in a research report from France that was prepared recently on the co-design approaches developed in public territorial policies in France. And I found the definition very, very interesting and comprehensive, because it really covers all the reality of what we mean by co-design. So through this definition, we see that co-design is a process of open and organized participation of a plurality of actors in the elaboration, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of public policies. This is also a well-constructed definition. It's good also to go back to the origins of what we mean by co-design. Well, initially, co-design was used in marketing, and it was considered as a kind of working method that involves the end user, the client, we would say, in the development and the design process of a product or a service. And co-design also refers to the idea of calling on different types of skills to co-design a product or a service, so as to reach the need of what is called the user or the client. And so the working methods of co-design really breaks with the fact of working in silos. And where we know all very much about this kind of method, and which struggle a bit against these methods. So co-design as a process for developing and implementing public policies has also become established in recent years, as reflected by these reports from where it's taken this definition. So this concept indeed seems particularly relevant at the local level, considering the proximity between actors that are concerned by the development of their territory. And this is particularly the case in education. Co-design applies overall to, as indicated in this definition, to the policy development phase, but also to its implementation and the monitoring and evaluation phase. So as I have highlighted in this slide, the particularity of co-design lies in the involvement of non-institutionalized actors, namely in relation to education, namely parents, pupils, civil society organizations, or even private or corporate companies. And it's important also to distinguish between co-design and other concepts that are quite close to this one, quite related. Namely, for instance, participation, consultation, negotiation. It's important to stress that co-design is not reduced to a simple consultation process by seeking to try a common agreement. The objective is really to go through a collective construction of issues and of solutions. Co-design also differs from negotiation in that it is based on the collective construction of issues and solutions indeed. So you see the added value of co-design and the difference with this concept. And so the research developed by IIEP on cities really pays particular attention to this concept, because we want to learn from the experience of cities in this regard. We have seen that cities practice co-design in the reality, trying to involve and to get all the actors of the local community, local education community, to design a relevant and meaningful city education strategy. So, this is this definition. Now let's go to the results of this research, and starting with the results of the survey that we conducted with you and with UIL a year ago. So in this questionnaire, in this survey, we have asked the question: how do cities rank the involvement of each of the following actors? So it's quite a number of actors, but it's true that these are all the actors that may be concerned indeed by the design, the implementation of the city's education strategy. And so your cities were asked to rank these actors according to a scale of ranking, according to the level we would say of participation, starting from being informed until really taking part in the final decision. And so very interestingly, we see that the cities participating in the survey indicated that several institutional actors like city authorities, the National Federal Ministry of Education, district education offices, and other ministries, they really have been involved. They have worked directly in the design of the city's education strategy. So I invite you to see indeed these results that are provided in purple. And we see that indeed, for instance, the subnational Ministry of Education, for this actor, 39% of your cities, of those who participated in the survey, really indicated this actor as really being involved and working directly in the design of the city's education strategy. And on the contrary, we see that the local education community has been consulted. So these are the results in green, has been consulted but did not participate in shaping the decisions. And that's the case of school heads, the teaching staffs, and also parents. We see that indeed they have, so indeed they have they have been consulted, but they did not went so further in this case. And we see also that the non-teaching staff, which is here, is the category of actors that has been the less involved in this process. You can see the results that are provided in blue and in red. So they have been informed, but also they have not been consulted. So these results are quite interesting. And interestingly, we found the same findings during the qualitative research that we conducted in France. Indeed, so for this research, so we conducted the field research in 4 cities, and we've had interviews with 100 of factors of the city education community in these 4 cities. And we learned there that really these cities, the city authorities, are paying very much attention to a process of co-designing. Although with imperfections, it's not as perfect as the definition says in the previous slide, as we have seen. But still, they have this willingness, and they are trying to go into this direction to design together with the local stakeholders, the city education community, to design the city education strategy. Indeed, the city authorities consider co-designing as a crucial process to ensure the ownership the relevant and the efficient implementation of the city education strategy with the different members of the local education community. So a large number of actors have been consulted, including institutional actors, like, for instance, a local inspector or the district education office, even some public administrations. Other sectors like the departments of culture, of sports, of neighborhood life, and so, but also school heads, school principals, and parents, they have been involved in this overall process. And even in one city, the consultation process was really broad, extending to all inhabitants, children and young people, but also to the private sector and the civil society. And so they organized some kind of formal exchange times with the stakeholders, consultation workshops, and consultation mechanisms. Then what we learned from the field research is that it's very then important to translate this effort of co-designing together at the inception phase, then to translate it in a co-designing on a daily basis. And that applies to the implementation phase of the city education strategy. Indeed, from the co-design, from conception, the co-design of the education strategy has extended to its implementation and the monitoring and evaluation phase. And in this regard, the communication about the city education strategy has been very crucial to ensure the ownership by all. So the cities have tried to make sure, or then have realized, we have discussed this with them, that it's very important to really adapt the language of communication about the city education strategy. So has to adopt a language that is used and that would be accessible to all actors. So to adapt it to each audience and to avoid abstract and very theoretical or institutional wording or jargon. So in the cities, different communication channels were planned to reach the different kind of stakeholders, the different kind of audience, ranging from very traditional mechanisms through the municipal newspaper, for instance, to also digital communication directly with the parents. Another key element for co-designing on a daily basis was the implementation of joint projects, bringing together the actors. And that was the case in the schools themselves between the teaching staff and the non-teaching staff. Also, in some cases, we have noticed the existence of cross-training, again, for teaching staff and non-teaching staff in relation to specific issues concerning the children at school. So these are key and instructive elements for co-designing on a daily basis. But still, I mean, co-designing has also a range of problems. I mean, it brings a number of promises, but it's not without challenges. Indeed, although I mean, trying to be really participatory, the consultation process in the design of the strategy excluded some stakeholders, as we have seen in the results of the survey. In France, we have seen that the teachers and also the non-teaching staff very often were not included in the process. In some cases, they have been informed that they have not been at all involved in all the consultation, discussion phase. Also, we learned that the language remained in some cases really too abstract, confusing for the actors, for the stakeholders, limiting thus their participation, their commitment, and also the ownership of the city education strategy by all stakeholders. And then also the interviewees highlighted the complexity of such a co-design process because it requires a lot of time. A lot of time to gather the people, to meet, to discuss, and to collectively take decisions. So it's a process again with a lot of promises, And but with these challenges, but I mean the benefits that come from such a process would be bigger actually than these constraints. And so we discussed with other French partners a few months ago this idea of co-designing and these challenges of complexity and the time involved and so. And all of them really stressed the idea that, okay, we need to take this time because the benefits will be very important for the overall efficiency and the ownership of the city education strategy. So these are the findings from the research conducting with this cluster and then through the qualitative research in France. So now I would like to move to the next phase of this session and so that we could interact between each other. So I would like to give the floor to my colleague Daniela, who is about to guide us in an interactive exercise. So Daniela, the floor is yours. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I will leave Daniela sharing her screen. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Candy. I'll share my screen. Good afternoon with everyone. Well, I'm Daniela, I'm part of the team. And now we are gonna, let me share here. Yes, so, okay, so sometime for interaction, we're gonna use this tool, Mentimeter. Maybe some of you are kind of familiar with that. So I will share with you here in the chat box. You can see, you will see, yes. Could you please go into this link? Go into this link that I just shared with you on the chat box. And then you will be able to see 2 questions. The first one concerning which of the following actors has your city consulted to design its education strategy? So yes, if you can tick all the options that apply for you, that would be great. And we can see here simultaneously the results that we are getting from the audience. So no answers yet. Is there anyone who's facing an issue, or are you all able to? Okay, there we can see some results here. So the 2 most important are school principals and local public administration, also teachers associations, NGOs, civil society organizations. Okay, great. Maybe 10 more seconds for you to vote. So
Indeed.
now the first one is local public administration. Yes. And we okay, we can move to the. Yeah.
Sorry, Daniela, we see indeed that 7 participants, people are participating, so that's great. So maybe let's wait a little bit because I see that we are about 30 in the meeting. So yes, I invite you really to participate. You see that we are getting very interesting results. Sorry, Daniela, I leave you continuing because just that we can see indeed the number of people that participated. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so now now it changed. Well, still the local public administration, 21%, and then also the NGOs and civil society organizations. Wow, this is very interesting. Okay, maybe we can move to the second question. What are the main challenges faced in co-designing the city's education strategy? And for you in your context, you can also tick all the options that apply for you. Wow. So okay, we are seeing here some results. Maybe we can wait a little bit. So the most voted is lack of human resources within the city administration to coordinate the co-design process. Okay. So about 12 people think that this is one of the main challenges, and also a costly and time-consuming process. Okay, another challenge faced in this process. So if we are, yes. Well, these are also very interesting results from the cities. And so, yes, give me, okay. Okay. Okay, no more votes then. I will stop sharing my screen because I think that okay, well, it's still moving, but we can clearly see that this lack of human resources are one of the main challenges. So it will also be like an opportunity, right, for us to think a bit more about think a little bit about this, and also for us to work maybe launch some other workshops regarding this, or some technical cooperation regarding this topic. Well, I will stop sharing my screen, but thank you very much for your participation. Yes, very interesting results. Yes.
Thank you, Daniela. And thank you all for having participating in this exercise. It's very useful, this kind of online tools, so to illustrate ideas during a workshop. So now I would like to invite our colleagues from Huejotzingo to share their screen and to present. They have very kindly accepted to make a presentation on this theme, and so we very much look forward to learning from their experience. So Adrian, or I don't know who will be presenting on behalf of Huejotzingo.
Adrian will be presenting,
okay.
but I will be translating for him. So
okay,
he will share his screen, and I will
perfect.
do the
Thank you
voiceover.
very much. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Thanks for the invitation. We would like to share the experience in Huejotzingo. Regarding the co-design of the education strategy that's been created by several actors. To answer the first question about why it's important to have the participation of the city in the educational system, we've tried to find certain specific needs to the city. An important key issue here is that there are no rules that mandate that the city should get involved in situations like this. What happens in Huejotzingo is basically a good practice that we want to share with other cities in the country. Of course, our key objective is to have several factors of society to have a role and a responsibility in this planning. Another objective is to have a financial backing to support the educational actions. This has been the process we've gone through, basically to go to be where we are now. We started with the census. We created several public consultation requests. Then we were going to organize several workshops with the several committees. Then we gave them official recognizing to the persons that were going to be in charge of the different areas. Then together we created an action plan. And afterwards, we have recognized the actors that have committed. Another important key point is that we have considered the opinions that in this case are the children, the boys and girls that participate in this educational system. And we actually created a committee with girls and boys. In Huejotzingo, there are several categories of actors. We have a civil society representatives. Governments, of course, companies, and from the educational sector. What we've wanted is to have the cities basically have responsibility in the planning and in the acting of this objectives. What are the challenges that we've faced as a city? Mainly to keep the interest of the different actors involved. Of course, every member of a group has some type of personal objectives. We've tried to avoid long meetings and try to focus on having actions being taken. The second challenge is political conflict. Huejotzingo is highly political. And of course, every member of a group has some type of commitment to someone, which difficults the work. The third challenge is to get a bigger number of people to participate. Even though there's a central committee for planning, what we're looking for is to generate regional subcommittees. And in those subcommittees to have more people participate that are not involved with the central committee. And as we mentioned, everybody that's part of this project also shares responsibilities. Another challenge is to have all those responsibilities being met. What are the lessons that we learned through this process? Incentives are essential. In this case, we created a recognizing program that recognizes the actors that get involved. The second is to create realistic goals and have them make them possible to meet. Even if the goals are small, they have to be accomplished. It's fundamental to have a strong leadership. In this sense, mainly because we need to keep the group together and keep it participating. And also, as we mentioned, it's very important to avoid long meetings and go immediately to action. It's also important to have adequate responsibilities to each stakeholder. And of course, as we've mentioned, it's important to listen to the beneficiaries, which in this case are the children, the boys and girls. Gradually, we're looking at our system of participation perfect itself because there are new conditions. It's not something that happens on a country level because, as we've mentioned, there's no rule, no frame of law that obligates the parties to take part of this. However, education is a key factor to the development of the city itself. We appreciate the space. We can go on with the rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and your colleague for the translation. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting and very much in line in line with the results of the research and what we have said in the previous slides. We have a few questions for discussions. We don't have a lot of time, maybe 5 minutes or so. We have also planned some questions for discussion, but firstly, do you have any questions on the presentations that were made so far? If not, so I will share with you again my screen with these questions for discussion. So we have a little bit of time. So the first question, we would like to ask you, all of you who represent your cities today, how has your city involved local stakeholders to design its education strategy? Has your city conducted a kind of broad process, consultation, participation, and so on of on a wide scope of the local education community, or has it been more restricted? And what were the tools and the means to do that? Would any one of you be willing to intervene on that question? Very briefly, but it's just for us to learn from your experiences and to share with the other cities. Have you, I mean, do the results of the survey and also the research in France and then from Huejotzingo sound similar to what you, I mean, the process followed by your city to prepare its education strategy? And is co-design a reality in your city? Would any one of you like to intervene on that very, very briefly? Then you can see also the two other questions that we've asked for discussion that we would like to learn from you. What you consider the pros and cons for designing the city education strategy. We have seen through the Menti exercise that you really think majority of you consider the process of being quite complex and quite time consuming as well. And so based on that, how do you think that the co-design process could be improved in your city based on what you've learned from Huejotzingo now, or from the other findings that we've shared with you?
Good afternoon. I would like to share the experience of Mantes-la-Jolie in France.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, my camera is not. In Mantes-la-Jolie, we have what we call a cité éducative. It's a national disposal with the school, with the local association, with all the services of the city. But students and families are not really involved, and the teachers also are not involved. And I think that it's one of the big challenge for us to really have all the stakeholders and to go deeper in this co-designing strategy.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we have worked also on the city of Grigny, which was an example of the cité éducative, indeed, and they raised this issue that indeed they would like to go further on how to get better involvement of all of these actors, and at the different stages indeed of the design of the policy, and but also in the monitoring and evaluation phase. So thank you very much, Aminata, for sharing the experience of Mantes-la-Jolie. I would be very happy to learn from at least one other city. I know that all of you are committed to your city and also to the activities of this workshop. So we would like very much to learn from you. Okay, so maybe there will be more interactions in the next session. So as you know, the time is a bit short for this workshop. So let's move to the second theme. And in any case, we will have the opportunity to discuss this topic later on the Google Classroom. So I leave the floor to my colleague Chloe, who will then discuss the second theme. Thank you.
Thank you, Candy. So I'm going to share my screen. Hello, everyone. I'm Chloe, working at IIEP. So some of you know me already. Can you see my screen? Is that working? Okay.
Yes,
great.
Thank you, Chloe. Yeah.
So let's now move to the second theme of our workshop, which relates to education and city integrated planning. So in our research at IIEP, we pay quite a lot of attention to the dialogue between sectors at the city level, and especially to how the education sector collaborates with other sectors. So why are we particularly interested in this topic of intersectoral collaboration? So we started our research with two main hypotheses. The first one is that we believe that the city is the prime location, which implies direct interaction on a daily basis between the different sectors of development, as you can see on the slide, between education and health, social welfare, environment, labor market, urban planning, etc., etc. And second, education is by nature linked to the other development sectors at the city level. And we know that education has a multiplier effect on the sustainable development of a city. But on the other hand, the education sector cannot achieve its objective on its own, and its impact does not only depend on the education sector policy itself. So there are continuous and necessary interactions between the different sectors. And in that sense, the development of integrated education strategy is essential to make these linkages between sectors operational. So we assume that intersectoral collaboration has benefits in terms of the implementation and the impact of the education strategy on the overall development of the city. But overall, in the research, in the literature, very little is known about this topic of intersectoral collaboration and integrated education planning. So what does this mean in practice? Is it a reality? So we believe that the city is a very interesting unit of analysis to study this dynamics. So as some of you know, at IIEP, we would like to focus our next research project on education and intersectoral collaboration at the city level. So we already had the opportunity to exchange with some of you about this, and I take this opportunity to particularly thank the city of Limerick, Medellin, and Huejotzingo for their great inputs, which are really helping us shaping our new research. But today, I'd like to share with you some insights on intersectoral collaboration that we gathered from our current research project and from the survey that we conducted as part of the activities of this cluster. So in the survey, cluster cities were asked to rank to what extent their city department in charge of education collaborates with other sectors of the city administration to implement the education strategy. So as you can see on the slide, the graph shows that city education departments collaborate the most with the culture and health sectors. About 85% of very much and much collaboration, the rating. But cities education departments also collaborate a great deal with the financing sector and the public safety sector. But we can also see that social affairs, environmental protection, ICTs, and gender also ranked particularly high. So the graph overall shows that the education sector collaborates with a wide range of sectors at the city level. We were also interested in learning through the survey from the potential challenges and problems that cities are facing when collaborating with other sectors. So the graph that you can see on the slide shows that the major issues faced by in this regard is the overlap of responsibilities between sectors, also a lack of communication and information sharing, and some kind of conflicting agendas and priorities between sectors. So this highlights overall a need for stronger dialogue and more coordination between sectors at the city level. So next, what's the reality in the French cities that we studied in relation to intersectoral collaboration? So in our research in France, we purposefully studied cities that place strong emphasis on education as part of their overall city development strategies. And I believe it's the same for your learning cities. So in particular, it was interesting because in one city called Orvaux, the city's education strategy is designed and implemented in such a way as to encourage intersectoral collaboration. So their education strategy is explicitly calling on the expertise and the involvement of the various municipal services. So this really facilitates intersectoral collaboration. And interestingly, the collaboration dynamics that we observed in France somehow reflects the results of the cluster survey. So we have seen particularly strong collaboration between education departments and the culture sector. Cities are offering cultural activities for children and youth, both within and outside the education time. So we've also seen that cities where there is a strong demographic growth and sometimes plans for urban renovation, the education sector collaborates with the urban planning department for issues related to school construction and school mapping. And we've also seen that cities in collaboration with schools are implementing projects that are related to education for sustainable development. For instance, through waste reduction and recycling initiatives in school canteens. And we've also seen that in the context of school constructions and renovation, cities are applying new environmental standards for the school buildings, and they are starting also to think about the greening of schoolyards to fight against heat waves, which is a growing issue in France, although we are in the northern part of the world. So I'd like also to talk a bit about the recent context. So we've seen that the cross-sectoral collaboration has been instrumental in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the city's education department have worked a lot with other sectors such as culture, social affairs, youth, or sports to ensure the continuity of the education service, and especially targeting the most vulnerable and disadvantaged children and youth. So it was particularly interesting to see in the cities that we studied in France that the cities and the National Ministry of Education have set up some kind of chains of communication to identify the families that were facing issues during the lockdown periods, and then provide material, food, psychological, and educational support. So we observed that the pre-existence of and the quality of the coordination mechanism between sectors have been really key for the effectiveness of the local educational response to the crisis. So nevertheless, there are important nuances to make to what I just said, which is quite positive. A first observation that we've made in France is that it's not always usual and easy to work in an intersectoral and transversal manner at the city level. So there are recurrent barriers to cross-sectoral collaboration, and they include an organization of work in silos, where the different departments of the city administration each have their own professional culture. Another obstacle that we've seen relates to a limited knowledge and understanding of the work of other departments or units of the administration. And interviewees also raised the issue of a lack of time to engage in collaborative work. And an important challenge as well that we observed with, for instance, a colleague who used to work at the municipality of Buenos Aires in Argentina is related to the sharing of data, which sometimes is an issue between departments and can somehow hinder cross-sectoral collaboration. But this being said, the research that we've conducted in France showed that there is at city level a strong awareness of the benefits of a collaborative and cross-sectoral approach to work, and really an intention to strengthen those approaches. So in the 4 cities studied, we found a series of initiatives that have been developed to strengthen the links between education departments and other municipal services, and they relate to a great extent the human resource management of the city administration. So first, in some cities, we've seen that some kind of pivotal or transversal positions have been created, and they are responsible for leading and coordinating the city education strategy. And these staff have strong interpersonal skills, and they play a pivotal role in facilitating relations between the various municipal services, but also with schools and families. And here we can link to what Candy said about co-designing. And they also have a strong ability to develop and manage partnerships. So this is these positions are a key lever for an enhanced cross-sectoral collaboration. We also noticed in the 4 cities that it was very beneficial for the city staff to have specific spaces for dialogue and dedicated time to better understand the jobs of other municipal services and to recognize the expertise and the legitimacy of each sector. And finally, one of the cities that we studied has initiated an interesting organizational transformation process of the city administration. So it's a participatory process where all the municipal services and staff are involved in order to adjust the organization part of the municipal administration, and with the idea to really decompartmentalize the services and make the collaboration more fluid. So that's what we've seen in France. I think I'll stop now on the results of our research, and I'd like now to give the floor to the city of Massao in Portugal, which will share with us their experience in developing a cross-sectoral initiative. So I'm really looking forward to hear from them, and I think I'm going to give the floor to Luis. So I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Chloe. Good morning, and thank you for this and very interesting presentation so far. I will share my screen, okay? Can you hear me well? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So just a second. Okay, I think you can see it, right? Okay. So I will try to bring you very briefly an overview of the situation of Massao. Massao is a small city in the center of Portugal. It's actually the geographic exact center of Portugal. And it is a very small community. However, for over 20 years now, it developed a strategy of trying to focus on education and culture as a major component of its own sustainability in general. And so in what concerns the strategy of Massao as a learning city, basically, as it was stated in the initial application, it's addressing 3 levels of challenges. One is a national challenge in Portugal, which relates to cohesion, development, and integration between the technological and also economic dimensions with humanities concerns. The second level is related to low density territories, which is a problem in different parts of Europe, but certainly in the inlands of Portugal, although when we say inland of Portugal, for most of you, all the Portugal is coastal, but nevertheless, we have a strong concentration of the population on the shore, over 70%, and so everything else is largely depopulated. Mação had over 20,000 people in the end of the 1980s, and it's now under 8,000. So it gives you a dimension of the loss, which is the same loss everywhere, and also aging that occurs in the country. Then there are some specific aspects of Mação itself in terms of tradition, in terms of the forest, because the forest was always the core of economic activities, in terms of heritage, namely related to that. The relation between the river and mountain context, because Mação sits precisely in the foot of the most important chain of mountains in the country, which is Serra da Estrela. And then it is a territory that has been devastated and is devastated on a recurrent way by severe fires that all of you certainly know that affect Southern Europe severely, and this particular region of Portugal in concrete. The strategy has been to understand education at large, at all levels, and formal and informal, and throughout life, as a tool, on one hand, for cohesion and also for social dynamics. So not only in terms of providing skills, but in this case, to also become part of the economic strategy, if you want. So articulating the different dimensions of formal and informal education is and has been a priority for a number of years, and to try to establish a shared knowledge in terms of the core concerns which relate to cultural knowledge, and agroforests knowledge has also been at the core of this. And so the relationship with UNESCO programs is part of that strategy, and certainly the Global Learning Cities Network is a core component of it. It's actually the affiliation to this network has been, in practice, the occasion to confederate in a stronger way the different activities and agendas that exist in the territory. So these are some of the affiliations that exist now in Mação. There's a UNESCO chair, which of course is related to higher education, but there's an important campus for advanced research in the city. The library is part of the national network of UNESCO libraries that has been established for a year now. There is also the school, and the school is part of ASPNet. And so you see this, you should understand this as a strategy to fight against the isolation and also the economic difficulties of the territory, focusing on education and culture. For example, there is a regular collaboration with UNESCO MOST, the Management of Social Transformations program of UNESCO, for a number of years now. So every year there are events with UNESCO MOST in the city. Another example is this program Bridges, which I think is very relevant as a new program of UNESCO for the global learning cities, because it is about looking at sustainability from a bottom-up approach, but actually with a tool, a UNESCO-related tool of confederating initiatives that go in this direction. Now, I'm trying to accelerate and to be as fast as possible in this so that we may have some discussion. I would like to have your feedback on this. Now, difficulties. I think in general, Mação is today quite well known, and being a very small municipality in terms of population, although it's big in terms of territory, it is the poorest municipality of the region in which it sits. It's a region, or a NUTS 3 region of 13 municipalities, and the poorest one in economic terms is Mação. But it's now very strongly known at national and even international level. So that would be something positive. Of course, it's a place that attracts the students from many different parts. At a secondary school, from 10, 11 years old until the pre-university, it attracts students from many other municipalities in the region, which would normally go to the schools in their own departments, but they recognize the quality of the teaching in Mação as being interesting for them and their families. And the same happens to the higher education. So there is a logic. So I'm talking about positive effects. There is a very strong connectivity between this formal core of education and everything which is informal, the senior university, the preschool teaching, the relation with families, the articulation with the social sector, the articulation with the museum and cultural activities and heritage. But of course, there's the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that it's still a poor region. It is still losing population as the others are, although it has been able to slow it down a little bit, but it still has this difficulty. And maybe we could identify 5 main matters of concern. One is there is a tremendous sympathy in the population to the strategy, which engages all the relevant institutions in Mação. When I say all, I mean the public, the education, the non-education, the private sector, the NGOs. Everyone works together, and so and also the individuals, and paying attention to individuals has always been a very important strategy. It's a very informal relation in that sense, and that is very good for a process of co-construction of the strategy itself. On the other hand, the fact that despite all these efforts, after 20 years of doing this, still brings disappointment. And so this is, of course, something that we have to understand and to try to design approaches to counter. A second element, and this is probably one of the most severe, is the administrative divides that are imposed by the national legislation and framework. I give you one example. Mação is doing the educational charter now, which is a national compulsory measure. All the territories need to design educational charters with a planning for the coming years. And this year, Mação is reviewing, is updating its own strategy. But when we had meetings, and again, the preparation of the charter engaged people from all the sectors you can imagine, but when suggestions were made to the technical team that articulates with national authorities in terms of integrating in the education charter everything which is not formal, the answer was, we can mention it in the introduction and in the closing, but we cannot integrate it in the planning, which is absurd, of course. But it's so Mação will go around that in practice, but this is, of course, a problem. There is also an issue of Not as much in Mação, but being a small and poor department, it has to follow largely regional and national guidelines. It is difficult to put forward the concerns of a long term, because what Mação discussed was, can we overcome our difficulties in 3 or 4 years? And the answer, the understanding is no, we cannot. So we need a strategy for decades. Now, it's very difficult to explain to national authorities to make investments for decades instead of the next 3 or 4 year cycle. And education is, of course, a central piece in that. There is a problem of mindset. Education is run in general as separated from everything else. The strongest, the most evident dimension of it is, of course, the divide between education and culture. And once you have different ministries and once you have structures with limited staff, even if the people involved, including the ministers, agree and would agree to work together, because they do in general, of course, but then in practice, they don't do anything together because they don't have time. And so it's the structure that blocks everything. In Mação, again, it was possible to overcome that, but it's always a delicate equilibrium. And so it's always a brittle situation. And then there is the issue of designing an economic strategy which is grounded on knowledge. We often, and people often talk about it, and authorities in the economic sector, because the economic sector understands the relevance of knowledge, and the education sector talks about the relevance of knowledge, but once knowledge, which has a strong cultural component, is detached from the cultural sector, the operation of this in relation to economics collapses. And it has been very difficult in Mação to build this bridge, despite everyone being agreeing to it, including the business corporation and so on. I put you on the right side of the slide. What is an impressionist approach, because this is not based on a scientific survey, but nevertheless, I think it's quite accurate in terms of what is the degree of implementation of this strategy. The strong point is, of course, the 100% of public institutions, and a very strong participation in terms of the third sector, and still quite strong of the local private sector. It's only 25% because this 25% includes all the it's not 25% of people, it's 25% of the economic activity. The mid-size companies are not so much involved. The big ones, yes, and all the small producers, yes, because in the end they are citizens, and the citizens are very strongly involved. But the mid-size companies, which are very important for local economics, because they are still, in any case, relatively small, they don't understand very well the relevance of education for their own business and their own life. Anyway, these figures are progressing and there is a strong cohesion. I will not go into details in these slides because I will send you the slides and you may share if you wish, but here on the left side, you can see more or less how the things are designed. So we have a city dynamics which has a number of players, the business center, the associations of producers, the touristic itineraries, the energy production, because energy is one important sector in the region. You have heritage with museum, spaces of memory and so on. You have, of course, the formal education and research, and then you have the long life learning, the senior university, senior club, NGOs, and our actual social park, and Mação is very, very active in this. And then we... Yes, I have to close. It's too long.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have limited time, so I was wondering if you could wrap up.
Yes, I will. If you give me 1 minute, I will do it in 1 minute.
Yes,
It's okay?
you.
Okay, yes, I know that I tend to go long in things, but I think that the slides are in a sense self-explanatory, and they give you a sense of what we try to do, which is learning being the tool actually to bring all the sectors together. So it's not so much that we try to engage the sectors in the learning process, but we try to design learning strategies for all the sectors, and learning becoming a tool for the integration of landscape management, of the general functioning of society. And in that respect, cross-generation activities is a very important component, because one of the problems of Nassau, as of all the low density territories, is that we have a large part of old population, retired people, and we have a strong component of young population. But those in the middle, even if they live in Nassau, most of them have to find work elsewhere. So there is a social problem related to that. And so in these slides, I was showing basically some examples, initiatives, trying to bring also the arts and the activities together. But I think I will stop, and please come to Nassau if you want to see more. In any case, we can continue in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Yeah, I personally found your presentation fascinating. And yeah, it's a bit frustrating that we have limited time, because I think, yeah, it was of interest for all of us, and I really liked how you presented that, and it was really also realistic and sharing with us the challenges that you're facing in that process. It was very interesting, and I think we should definitely talk more also in relation to our next research projects. It would be very interesting to know more about what you're doing in Nassau. I think we are going to maybe do a slight change in the organization of the workshop, just to make sure we have time to cover everything we wanted to cover. So we will keep maybe the questions for discussion at the end. I just like, I'd like now to maybe, to give the floor to Daniela for just a quick quick icebreaker, and just to, maybe to rest, because we've been listening to a lot of presentation, and then we can move to the third theme. Thank you, Daniela.
Okay. Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. I will briefly share my screen. Okay, can you see? Okay, so it's time for some interaction right now. So now we would like you to share your views with us about these two main questions. Please, sorry. Let me share this link on the chat box, so you can click on it and go to Menti again, and you should be able to see our first question. So with which other sector or sectors does your city collaborate with when designing and implementing your education strategy? So you will be able here to type some answers. It's not necessary that you type seven answers, but some sectors that you have been working with or collaborated in the past, or you are willing to collaborate when designing and implementing. So let's see some results. Yeah, so maybe 30 seconds to answer this question. Okay, so we have the first two answers: civil society, enterprises, sports, culture. maybe some other answers. Wow, business centers, okay, business again, universities, NGOs. Maybe a bit of more seconds. We have enterprises, sports, civil society, universities. Okay, health. Yeah, health. We see culture. It seems that culture is a very frequent sector that cities collaborate with. Health. Okay. Yes, health. We also enterprises again. Okay. Yes, we have more answers here. Okay, so culture again. Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for your answers and for this very interesting. Well, this word cloud is moving very nice. Cities, okay, NGOs, okay, health. Okay. Well, thank you. Maybe we can move on to our second question. There. So now, what are the main challenges faced by you, the cities, in trying to promote collaboration between education and these other sectors? So we have some options there. Please take all that apply for you, for your context. Wow. Some more answers. Yes, so it seems that lack of resources, human and economic assigned to joint activities is one of the main challenges, followed by difficulties to break a culture of working in silos, and the lack of communication seems also a main challenge. So about 12 people think that lack of resources is again a challenge you face. And again, right, difficulty to break this culture of working in silos. Maybe 5 more seconds to grab the last answers. Okay, I think this is it. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing, yes, your experience, your context, and well, these main challenges. And now we can move forward to our next. Oops. Yes. So, Candy, now, yes, I leave the floor to you.
Yes, I think that in this case, as we are running a bit out of time, so we'll move directly to this last theme, and we'll keep the questions for discussion at the end of the workshop, or the end of the workshop. So you can stop sharing your screen, Daniela, and Alex will take the floor for the last theme of the workshop. Thank you very much, Daniela, and thank you all for your participation in these Menti exercises.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so maybe it's me indeed, it's me, I'm just starting.
A couple of minutes, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I have very quickly, I would like to share with you some findings about the research that we've been undertaking. Yes, although that what we learned a lot about the challenges that are faced by cities in monitoring and evaluating their education strategies. And similar results, similar findings from the survey, from your cities, but also from France. overall, it appears that they face lacking of tools, of appropriate tools to evaluate, to monitor, a problem in regarding the use of indicators, and what kind of indicators should we use, and in particular to monitor an education strategy that aims at, that have a holistic approach, a holistic scope to benefit overall to the full development of a child. So, and again, here also the lack of appropriate resource persons to conduct these exercises. The cities also stress the difficulty to animate a steering committee over the long term. And we were talking at the beginning of this workshop of co-design approach, and that the same idea to keep all people on board in the monitoring phase. We can think of a plane, and so who will be in this plane, who will be monitoring the overall city education strategy. And then, so at the beginning of the process, all the actors are there, but then it's very difficult to keep their commitment all throughout the process. Also, we learned from the cities that it's quite, your cities, every city is somehow working in the very quick evolving context, dealing with maybe national guidelines to apply, or very, new context and emergency context, like the sanitary situation, and overall this leaves very little time for proper monitoring. So, and they were also dealing with a culture of evaluation, a lack of appropriate culture of evaluation. But I won't take too much time. I will now leave the floor to Alex for other findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Candy. So we're going to just talk briefly about monitoring and evaluation, specifically in relation to a city's education strategy, but we'll also place that within the context of lifelong learning, which is something we heavily promote through the GNLC. So here you see a breakdown of challenges faced by cities when it comes to monitoring and evaluation. And we see this recurring theme really throughout the workshop, lack of human resources. So I think that's something we really need to reflect on. If that's always the case, then what changes need to be made to ease the burden, perhaps on human resources, or find new ways of working that aren't so resource intensive, but still allow for collaboration and effective monitoring and evaluation. Also, data, or a lack of data, is an issue which I'll address in more detail in one of the next slides. So as I mentioned, I'm just jumping back a bit, because a lot of this work that we're doing now is within the context of the global network of learning cities, and we work mainly to promote lifelong learning, not necessarily specifically education, but as Candy was just saying, the education strategy should be looking at education as a holistic process that involves the well-being of the child, but indeed moving up through different levels of education and different ages, spanning not just across childhood, but beyond. So through the UNESCO GNLC, we're trying to provide tools and instruments to promote and to recognize progress in terms of lifelong learning and building learning cities. So that's just to make the connection between lifelong learning and education within cities, and specifically the education strategy, which can be developed with a lifelong learning perspective to take into account different sectors, different actors, and different levels of education. So we have referred already in this workshop to a survey we implemented last year. These were some of the key findings when it came to monitoring and evaluation. So it's particularly interesting in terms of the data that's used by cities to try to monitor and evaluate their education strategy. So you see here that lots of cities are using internal data, multi-year activity reports, very popular, internal evaluation reports. When it comes to external data, you see here, and I think this was mentioned by Hui Hutzingo earlier, the use of census data, but also national databases. So this is a question that we'll come back to hopefully in the discussion. What data is available to cities and disaggregated at the local level, so that you have an accurate picture of the local level and not just what's happening nationally. In terms of education management and information systems, EMIS, it was about half and half. So just over half the cities that responded do have a system in place in terms of managing information on education, and just under half do not. But interestingly, for the cities that do have such a system, they tend to use it more for formal education, and specifically public schools, less so for non-formal education. And yet, at another point in the survey, we saw that cities tend to have more responsibility when it comes to non-formal education in the development of curricula and the training of facilitators. So there could be a mismatch there in terms of what cities actually have control over or jurisdiction within education and what they're able to monitor. And then we see here that, in fact, a significant number of cities do have a unit in charge of collecting and interpreting data. So even though there are those human resource challenges, still many cities are working actively to collect and interpret data. So some cities we've seen within the GNLC have started to develop their own framework to monitor and evaluate either education or lifelong learning. I won't talk about this in too much detail, but we have a general globally applicable framework for monitoring lifelong learning in cities. And this is just to show that there are ways of developing indicators that go beyond the formal education system and cover non-formal learning to an extent, also different learning contexts. So the example that's on the screen here is for the promotion of inclusive learning within the education system. But we have other areas such as learning within families, within the community, in the workplace, and indicators that correlate with those learning contexts. So it's just something to bear in mind when the education strategy is developed and monitoring mechanisms are developed to track the progress of the strategy, considering the various learning contexts and seeing whether there is data available to prove progress maybe beyond the formal education system. I think we're going to just leave the final Menti to the end. Sorry, Daniela, just we'll bring it back if there's time. But we're just conscious to try to make sure there's enough time for a discussion. But before moving to the discussion, I want to make sure we give plenty of time to Medellin to present on this final topic, monitoring and evaluation. So I'm happy to now just stop sharing my screen and to hand over to Medellin. Is it Diana?
Perfect, Alex. Yes, thank you so much. I will share my screen right now. I don't know what happened. Okay. Let me check here because...
If it doesn't work, I can probably share your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Yes, because I having some problems here with the...
Okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. We're still happy to share our experience about the Observatory for the Quality Education of Medellin. My name is Diana, but although I am presented here, there is a team of 19 people working on this observatory. And please next. the mission of the observatory is to have an evaluation strategy as shared learning. As we were talking about co-design, we have that word of shared learning specifically. And the mission is to develop actions to generate and manage knowledge and innovation that contributes to analyze, design, monitoring, and evaluation different plans and programs that at the end is the way to analyze and measure public policies for the educational system of the municipality of Medellin. Please, next. To do so, we have a social appropriation of knowledge that has those 5 areas. The first one is an information system, is where we organize and gather all the data we have available, and we have it from different sources. Then we move to the knowledge management, how this information start to tell us a story, start to help us make decisions based on data. Then we move to the research and articulation with different strategies, with different stakeholders, as we are going to see. And here in this phase is how we can start making questions, how we can start having hypotheses for strategies, for new strategies with different partners. And this work is not only for the municipality itself. We realize that we cannot do it alone, although we have the capacity, although we lead this project. It's with different stakeholders, even at the national level, international level, and how we can create different proposal according to the needs, according to what the data is telling us. Then, as we have within the data, we have different uses, and that is why we move to the next, that is the project bank. So, okay, we have data, we have different needs, we have different concerns, and how with this project bank is how we can answer questions, how we can try to solve the needs that they dictate with the data. And as Candy mentioned before, is a construction of solution and of different issues that we have within the communities. And at the end, what happened here, we have here in Medellin something called participatory budget. So people can design how they can relocate their budget specifically for the communes. Medellin is specifically split up by communes that are made up of different neighborhoods, school, facilities, etc. So they can prioritize what kind of projects they can do according to this data. So stakeholders are an active part, communities are an active part of this world project. This is how we can manage the territory. This is how we can get people involved on the educational transformation we want to achieve, because at the end, the communities, students, teachers, parents, they are the owners of their needs. So if we build up with them at the community level, specifically with them, and not only as a bottom-up approach, we can have long-lasting solutions. And in that way, we are talking about lifelong learning. Please, next. So within these 5 areas, we have this assessment and monitoring of lifelong learning. And to do so, we have 2 axes that are so important and get across all of this. And the first one is how we can actually assess and monitoring, and how we can contribute to the improvement on living conditions. So we have a diverse situation, we have vulnerability or concern. So within this, we are going to guarantee the right to education as a reality. So to do so is specifically with data and specifically with them. Also, is how we show the results of any implementation, how we see if that desirable change actually happened. And could be that the change happened positively or negatively, but it's how we can generate recommendations or lessons learned according to this specific project of MIA. Next, please. So as I mentioned before, we have different stakeholders involved. We divide it here into internal actors, external and community actors. The internal actors are those specifically at the Secretary of Education, different programs, different teams that need the data, for instance, to policymakers to create decisions, to make decisions. We have also public institutions within our communities, educational communities. Here we have students, teacher, principal, parents, people involved all of this. Also, we have external actors. For instance, there are programs or teams from within the mayor office, but they also need information from the educational system. We also have private educational institutions, private companies, universities, and research groups. Could be national or at the international level as well. We also have, and as an observatory, we work along with different observatories that share that part of educational approaches, how we can learn from each other, how we can build the capacity of our city. And also public institutions that manage data or information related to education. One of the examples is the Ministry of Education. They have public national data, for instance, about enrollment. But what we do is how we can have this national data, national indicators according to our territory, how we understand this data. For instance, we have enrollment, we need to guarantee permanency on education. But for instance, specifically on the case of Medellin with COVID-19, how we can read data, for instance, to connectivity, to guarantee this permanence on its students. And we also have community actors that are key and crucial in all the process. We have community-based leaders, representative of communities, community-based organizations or NGOs, and how we get them involved, how we train these people to understand and also to create small observatories within their communities and within their territories. Please, next, Alex. Okay, for sure, this is a huge program. This is a huge project, and we face different challenges. One of them is how do we generate the strategies that incorporate recognition of territorial particularities and differential approaches. What we mean with that is that we have national guidelines, for instance, how we can read these guidelines and this data on gender, on ethnicity, on specific communities, how we can relate the information according to these particular particularities of our territory. Although it's small, we have differences among neighborhoods. So how we can relate on that. Also, one of the main challenges is to design on instruments and tools that are practical for monitoring and evaluation. We have a lot of data from different sources and how we can design instruments that are really useful for the MIE process. We also need to design of public tools to collect information and disseminate the results, challenges, and processes. Here is really key to get people involved. It's not only the policy makers, decision makers that are like working with this data, how this data is public and have like everyone can access to it, is parent, teachers, and they need to understand how the educational system works for them. Next one, please. So some of the lessons learned is we need to unify languages. It's not only about programming languages for that. As mentioned before, we need to unify language to communicate and disseminate in a way that is understandable for different audiences, how we can communicate results to students, how we can communicate results to parents, teachers, principals, and different stakeholders that need to understand and know what is this all about. Also, we need to generate and communicate the capacities from the different tools, technical tools that we have here. So is a way that we can connect, and it's connected with the next one, how we can train people, how we can pass out like the process to them, how we can train in specifically, because we cannot be there 24/7 on the communities. But if we have a capacity specific there, if we can train them, they can be the owners of this process, because we're talking about here collecting data, we're talking about here making decisions based on data. So people need to get involved. So to have leaders specifically in different territories. And this phrase, what is not report or disseminate, does not exist. Maybe there are people that are asking questions about the educational system, and maybe they don't know where the data is, how to manage the data, how to take actions according to this data. And this is why we have specific examples of what we do with this reporting and dissemination process. The next slides, please. Where you can see a dashboard specifically, and this is for connectivity. So here you can see, for instance, we
have a technical issue. We lost Diana there.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else here from Medellin who would like to take over? No. Okay, well, I think we'll pause and maybe Diana can rejoin. But it was really fascinating so far. I think she was nearing the end of the presentation. Really interesting points about training people to use the data, training people within communities as well to be involved in the monitoring and evaluation process, which would really help to counter some of the issues in terms of trying to manage everything from the city level within the municipal government. So I think we'll just jump straight to the discussion. I'll just need to change PowerPoints for a second, and then we'll have a final discussion covering theme 2 and theme 3, but I think really we can open it up, and if there's something that came to mind when you were listening to Juanjo Zingo's presentation, or Masao or Medellin, please feel free to ask any question that comes to mind. Likewise, if you have something to say from your perspective on any of the 3 themes, then you're welcome to do so. I'll just share the final questions just for reference, in case they're useful in prompting a discussion. So I'll just make that larger. Okay, so we won't go through them one by one, but it's just to provoke some thoughts from you. How has the COVID-19 pandemic led to cross-sectoral initiatives between the education sector and other sectors? What do you think are the key conditions to facilitate intersectoral collaboration? Are there mechanisms in place in your city to collaborate and create a dialogue with other sectors? So this is on the topic of collaboration. In terms of monitoring and evaluation, what would you say are strengths or weaknesses in your city in terms of monitoring and evaluation? And then when it comes to indicators, so what kind of indicators do you use? What are maybe some unique indicators that you use within your city or that are particularly useful? So I'm just throwing those questions out there to prompt some discussion. Please feel free now to raise your hand, or just to turn on your camera, turn on your microphone and start to speak. Welcome back, Diana. Sorry, we lost you there towards the end.
I'm sorry, I was talking about connectivity, yeah. And I have problems with my connectivity. That happened. So
that's typical. Okay. Typical.
Yes. But in any case, we will share in the slides, and on the slides there is examples of practical issues we have on the dashboard and the information we share for the community. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for this issue. It
No
happens.
problem. No, thank you very much. I was just saying, actually, when you dropped out, it was a really fascinating presentation, particularly the point about training people within communes to be involved in the development of the strategy and monitoring and evaluation. So training leaders within individual communities, which takes some of the pressure off the municipal government, perhaps, in the long term. So it was really interesting. Thank you. And so, yes, anybody from any city, whether you've presented or not, if you'd like to share something on any of the topics, ask a question to any of the presenters or to us, now's the chance. So please feel free, anybody, to just jump in, turn on your microphone, turn on your camera, and ask away. Anybody would like to speak? The Menti activities have been quite popular. I just wanted, I mean, we have one more. Yeah, is that, sorry, Candy?
No, I was thinking maybe because there's a lot to say, and I mean, we are about to reach the end of the workshop, but maybe I was thinking we could share these questions on the Google Classroom and to have a kind of thread of discussion with all of you. That would be great. And maybe I think we can jump into the last Menti activity about the conclusions for this workshop. I leave Daniela sharing a screen.
Yes, thank you very much, Candy. I'll share my screen right now. And oops, just a second. So, well, we are about to end this workshop with very interesting experiences and insights. And before that, I would like you to share with us through this link. Yes, on the chat, please find it here. So click on it, and then you will be able to see our last question for you. So what are your main takeaways from this workshop? We have been sharing Huejotzingo, Masao, and Medellin experiences, and also well, some research findings, right, regarding these 3 topics that that we have been working on today. So yes, feel free to share with us your thoughts, and you can briefly type on them and they will show up here, so we can all see what are your main takeaways. Maybe 30 seconds or 40. We have the first one, challenges faced by cities in monitoring. Excellent to learn from other cities, although in different locations, we mostly share the same challenges. Yes, that's true. That's something that we also have been discussing that recently. Interesting to follow the presentations. Yes, and despite the different contexts, very things in common, right? Insufficiency of human resources. Yes, for going beyond the silos. Collaboration, education strategy, useful information, learning strategy planning. Yeah, schemes to promote the participation of different sectors. Yes. And in the level of time work involved not only in making time for intersectoral, but also breaking down silos and alignment of educational strategies to local priorities. Yes, which is also very relevant. Yes. Well, we have many. We can get to know other people that work in a similar way. Yes, exchange of strategies and learn from each other. And this is one of the main objective of also this workshop, to share, to learn from each other, right? And okay, there's a interesting evaluation. Well, thank you very much for your active participation here. This is very, very important for us, very useful. And now, case to be interesting. Yes, we also found it very, very interesting. So it will be great also to continue the discussion in a future event. Well, I will stop sharing, and thank you very much for your participation.
Yeah. So maybe can you share the last slide, Daniela, yes, please? And as I told you in introduction, we really want to continue learning from you and discussing with you. So we give you this opportunity to use the Google Classroom and to share a few ideas with us. So firstly, we would like you to draft a very short paragraph about in which ways you think you would apply these lessons of this workshop in your own context. So it would be great if you could share it with us on the Google Classroom by the 10th of July. Several of you on these last Menti exercises raised the importance of sharing experiences in spite of that you are working in different contexts. And we see that in France, in Macau, Portugal, in Medellin and other countries, and in Medellin. And so we face the same issues, and that's what we learned from the research, and that's why we are now launching this research in Asia, Central America, and Africa, and so please share a few words with us. And then also, I think that, as suggested with Alex, we will put in the thread of discussion of the Google Classroom these questions for discussion that actually ask for a bigger discussion together. We will put them within the Google Classroom and would be very happy to read you. So again, as you know, this kind of platform is very easy to use. You can write a short sentence, a few words. And for us, UIL and IIEP, I mean, this feeds into our own findings to provide relevant advice or recommendations, or also to your cities, and to provide, the good insights from all of these activities and the research together. So, we are learning from you, and then we pass off this knowledge. So I would like to thank again all of you for your participation during these 2 hours, and the 3 cities that have made great presentations, very to the point and very stimulating and enriching. Again, even though we are doing the research, we learned a lot. So thanks a lot. And so we look forward reading you soon on the Google Classroom. Thank you very much. Alex, I leave you the floor to close.
Okay, thank you, Candy. So yes, just to say that question has now been posted on Google Classroom. So if you follow the link I posted in the chat, you should be able to register, and we'd really like to hear from you on there. Also, we'll make sure that we share the presentations that we've seen today with everybody in the cluster. And hopefully this is the beginning of a dialogue, because there were so many interesting points that came out of all 3 presentations about the particularities of local context, geographically, politically, educationally, socially, economically, and yet all of these commonalities that seem to apply across very diverse contexts. So I think that we have a lot to collaborate on, and lots of interesting insights to share that will really strengthen the whole process of planning for education within the city. and of course within the context of lifelong learning. So thank you everybody for taking the time to attend the workshop. A big thank you as well to the presenters for taking the time to prepare those PowerPoints. And it was just a really interesting experience. So thank you everyone, and I hope to see you on Google Classroom, and we'll be in touch again soon. And have a good evening, have a good day, and see you next time.